Let's talk monkeys. A group of researchers placed 5 monkeys in a room. In the middle of this room was a ladder with bananas on the top. Hey, so this isn't exactly how the experiment was conducted, and in truth, other researchers have called the validity of this particular study into question. Nevertheless, as Mark Twain says, never let the truth stand in the way of a good story. So with that, back to the monkeys. Every time a monkey went up the ladder to try to get the bananas, the researchers would spray the rest of the monkeys with cold water. After a while, every time a monkey went up the ladder, the others would beat him up. After all, they didn't want to get sprayed with cold water. After some time, no monkey dared go up the ladder regardless of the temptation. The researchers then substituted one of the monkeys. The first thing the new monkey did was try to climb the ladder to get the bananas. Immediately, the other monkeys beat him up. After several beatings, the new monkey learned never to climb the ladder, even though he never really knew why, having never received a cold shower himself. A second monkey was substituted, and the same thing happened. But this time, the first monkey substituted participated in the beating of the second monkey. A third monkey was substituted, and the same cycle repeated itself. This continued until all 5 monkeys were substituted and none of the original 5 remained. What was left was a group of 5 monkeys that never received a cold shower and yet continued to beat up any monkey who tried to climb the ladder. If it were possible to ask the monkeys why they beat each other up every time they tried to climb the ladder, their answer might be something like, "I don't know, that's just how things are done around here." I'm Dr. Lon Schiffbauer, and this is Communication in an Organization's Culture, or A Barrel of Monkeys. So, is this sort of behavior good or bad? We're going to come back to that question, but first, let's talk about organizational culture. Culture is the operating system running in the background that determines the way people work and interact. It directs how information flows and how people and systems interact and collaborate. Culture is based on the shared experiences and histories of the organization's members, histories rich in symbolism and stories. As a result, an organization's culture is organic and continually changing. This also means that an organization's culture is inherently nebulous, containing contradictions, paradoxes, ambiguities, and confusion. Paraphrasing Morpheus from the movie The Matrix, culture
is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes.
Culture is created and proliferated through our behaviors, through our interactions. We're talking things like modeling, observation, imitation, instruction, correction, storytelling, gossip, reward, coercion, things like this. In other words, culture is created and proliferated through internal communication. Internal communication is the mechanism by which every aspect of culture manifests itself. So with this in mind, let's look at this in a little more detail. First, we have observable actions and behaviors. These are the behaviors by which organizational members affirm and communicate the organization's culture to one another. For instance, team meetings, eating together in the cafeteria, what is or is not included in reports, and group decision-making are just a few examples of observable behaviors that communicate and affirm cultural beliefs, values, and assumptions. It's in these observable actions and behaviors that we see culture in the day-to-day work, how people interact, collaborate, cooperate, get the work done. This is internal communication in its purest sense. Next, we have visible manifestations of structures and processes. These are things like dress codes and the use of language, practices, the rituals and rites of doing the work. It's in these visible manifestations of structure and processes that we see that internal communication is more than just what is written or spoken. It includes every aspect of symbolic expression. The way we dress telegraphs our place in the collective. the industry-specific words and jargon we employ communicate our place in the organization. The pictures, plaques, and tchotchke that we display on our desks express our identity to our coworkers. Third, we have espoused values. These are the documented and promoted strategies, philosophies, sort of the raison d'etre that leadership sets and is often documented with human resources. It's in these espoused values that are documented in policy manuals and practices and process guides and so forth that culture and internal communication really come together in its most sort of bureaucratic sense. Next, we have our underlying assumptions. These are the taken for granted thoughts and beliefs and attitudes that we hold in the organization. Those things that we don't really question, we just assume them. In many ways, these underlying assumptions really determine what the organizational members see as real and important, and likewise, what is not real and doesn't even bear considering. Because of this, our underlying assumptions often direct what we even discuss or explore, those things that we perceive as opportunities and threats. Thing is, there are other opportunities and threats out there in the environment, but our underlying assumptions may not allow us to see them. Then we have the organization's myths. These are the stories that we tell one another sort of as morality tales within the organization. They give people a sense of right and wrong, culturally accepted attitudes and beliefs, and espoused virtues and behaviors that the organization embraces. These myths also give our behaviors a place in a larger context. And it's in the telling of these stories and myths that we reinforce culturally acceptable values, norms, and behaviors among one another. After all, when you think about it, storytelling is like the deepest and oldest form of cultural perpetuation. Anywhere that you have two or more people, you have storytelling, and a workplace is no different. Finally, we have cultural ideologies. These are the shared and interrelated, oftentimes emotionally charged values that really decide our behavior. These set the rules and norms of the organization, the rules of engagement, how the game is played. Sometimes we see this in the form of internal politics or in power plays and so forth. But we all know what the rules are and when we're operating inside the bounds and outside the lines. These are all part of our cultural ideologies. In this way, culture subtly steers us into compliance with how things are done by the collective. When we do something that is in accordance with the culture, the behavior is rewarded and reinforced. When we do something that runs counter to the cultural norms, the behavior is punished. Think about this as we consider the monkey analogy that we explored earlier, kind of setting the rules of the road, the rules of engagement. Now, in all of these aspects of culture, we can see both the positive and the negative. One thing to remember is that culture is amoral. It's not good or bad, it's how it's applied. However, we both know that it can be applied to some pretty devastating effects sometimes. For example, corporate culture can threaten individual autonomy with, as Gideon Kunda put it, a rather subtle form of domination, a culture trap combining normative pressures with a delicate balance of seductiveness and coercion. When we look at it this way, it can sound pretty sinister, but is it? It all depends on the behavior that we're talking about. If the behavior that we're talking about is somebody habitually coming in late or missing deadlines or being disruptive in the workplace, then yeah, odds are employees are going to gang up on this person. Now, they're not going to beat them up like the monkeys did. They're going to send both subtle and not so subtle messages that these behaviors are not appropriate in the organization. On the other hand, if the behavior we're looking at is perhaps somebody who's hitting their deadlines, making the customers happy, pleasing the stakeholders, making the team look good, mentoring others, and raising the game for the whole organization, then we are going to reward and validate and encourage these behaviors. So in this way, cultural ideologies, as well as all the other aspects of culture that we've discussed, can make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. On the other hand, it can also isolate and marginalize those members who are not really stepping in line. And this can be both for the benefit of the organization as well as the detriment. Think about how many people have been kicked out of an organization and then went off and did great things while the organization continued to languish. That shows that the problem was with the culture, not the individual. So once again, internal communication, a lot more than emails, memos, and meetings, right? As I said earlier, it is the mechanism by which culture operates. As former Costco CEO and co-founder Jim Sinegal once said, culture is not the most important thing, it's the only thing. Well, if this is the case, then effective internal communication is far and away the most important key to an organization's success. All right, so there you go. Thank you for joining me, and until we talk again, have a fantastic day.